Chad Karp was only 3 years old when he was diagnosed with a rare, inoperable brain tumor. He underwent 30 rounds of radiation at Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Then the little boy participated in the clinical trial at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. Although there is no remission, cure, or treatment for the type of tumor Chad has, his family, friends, and strangers are rallying around the little boy with the infectious smile. The Facebook page Pray for Chad Karp has 20,000 plus likes and counting. I live and practice in Detroit, and I believe our city and the people that live here represent the best of America. I wanted to create a place that folks can go to that not only delivers health information, but also helps us share inspirational stories to help all of us grow. With real problems discussed in depth with real solutions. You are the most important person, you're the patient. This is Ask Dr. Lee. Hello and thank you for joining us. Today's topic is frankly a tough one. No child deserves to have cancer, and no child should have to go through the pain and grueling medical procedures that accompany a cancer diagnosis. But unfortunately, it happens. The adorable little boy you just saw is the grandson of legendary University of Michigan football coach Lloyd Karp. His family and friends have adopted the slogan, Chad Tough, as a way to support him. Today, we're going to discuss childhood cancer, from the causes to the symptoms to the treatment. Stay right here. We'll be right back.
The next day, I woke up and I had more of a peace over me, and I just had this feeling that our job was to spread his story and help make a difference.
Back, you're watching Ask Dr. Nandi. It's likely you've heard Chad Karp's story on news reports or social media. Now, Chad has a disease known as DIPG, which primarily affects children. The brain tumor grows fast and disturbs the function of the nervous system. Since the diagnosis, Chad's family has gotten support from all across the country. I'm pleased to have Chad's mother, Tammy Karp, here today. Please welcome her. Tammy, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
Good to meet you.
Thank you. Same here. And for those of us, people are watching, there are people all over the world watching. Tell us about Chad. What happened and what's been going on with him?
Chad is a beautiful, precious little 4-year-old boy who unfortunately has been stricken by a brain tumor called DIPG, like you mentioned. He was every day playing, average little boy. Then he started falling a lot, and he actually fell and broke his nose. And we took him.
How old was he when
he was 3, actually.
Then. Okay.
Yeah, he was 3, and took him into the hospital, and we just didn't feel like something was right. So they actually sent us home and said, "Well, it's a broken nose, nothing really to worry about."
Really?
Yeah, but we just didn't think it was right. Something just didn't seem right. So we took him back the next day and kind of demanded that we get an MRI. And they said the MRI would take about 2 hours, and about 3.5 hours we're still sitting there.
Oh, wow.
And I figured this can't be good news. And unfortunately then they came back and gave us the diagnosis, so it was pretty shocking.
Let me ask you this. So, again, we talk a lot in Ask Dr. Nandi to be an advocate for your children. How long was it between the time when you were told that, hey, it's nothing, and then you went back? Was it the very next day?
It was the next day. I woke up in the middle of the night, the day we had been at the ER, and I just had this peaceful feeling of something just doesn't seem right. We have to take him back there tomorrow.
Wow.
And to me, God was telling me something. So
yeah, and we hear this all the time. So many people that have the intuition. If you have something in your mind that says, you know what, something is wrong, then definitely go get a second opinion. And so then he was diagnosed with something on the MRI, right? And so they tell you that they thought it was a cancer right away?
They did. They knew pretty quickly that it was a DIPG, because the DIPG is in the brain stem, and
Correct.
They could see that pretty well
Right
on
away.
the MRI.
And they gave you the diagnosis. And how did that make you feel? I mean, how long has it been since that diagnosis?
It's almost been exactly a year.
Wow. So
And
I'm
they
sure
told
it's a
us
huge
9 to 12 months is what
good
they
Lord.
expected. But that was definitely the worst day of our lives. There's no doubt about that. You go from thinking your child is just, broke his nose, had a little fall, to they're telling you there's nothing they can really do. So it's nothing you can ever prepare yourself for, that's for sure.
What are the emotions that went through your mind at that time?
Honestly, I just remember feeling like I was a pile of mush on the floor, really, and I just wanted it to be me instead.
Oh. How did you deal with it? What did you do?
You know what? That night was really hard, the first night, but the next day I woke up and I had more of a peace over me, and I just had this feeling that our job was to spread his story and help make a difference, and to get people praying for him, and that, praying for a miracle for him. And I told my husband, I said, we have to make this big. This is what I feel like we're supposed to do, and we need to get the word out. And so that's what we've been doing ever since.
Oh wow! And it's you're very courageous. We have people that come on our show, and they have, nothing can ever compare to what happening to your son, but they have tragedies happen, and one of two things can happen: is that it takes over your life, and then you just succumb to it, meaning that you just say, well, this is horrible, I can't believe this happening to me, and just suck into it.
Yeah.
Or you can say, you know what, I'm gonna look beyond yourself and see how I can help others, and that's what you did. So I applaud you. We have a name for people like you. It's a health hero. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for helping others and coming on our show and talking about this again when it's not easy to do it. And so what's been going on since then? Has he had treatment? And tell me what you've done. You've had a foundation that you've created, right?
Yes, we did. He is doing really well, actually. I mean, they give us the prognosis of about 9 to 12 months, and we're almost over that 12-month hurdle. And he's doing well. He's on an experimental drug right now, so we feel very grateful that he's been able to acquire that, and we're hopeful. People with DIPG are hanging their hopes on this. So.
And my producers told me about the support that you guys have gotten, really has been tremendous from social media. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's so much support?
My son's grandfather is Lloyd Karp, who was the coach of the Michigan football team for a long time.
Sure.
So I think there was a lot of initial publicity around that. So I think a lot of people heard his story initially, but that doesn't explain necessarily the support. People have come out of the woodwork.
From all over the country.
From all over.
We've never even heard of.
No,
Michigan,
not even Michigan. It doesn't matter if you're a Michigan fan or whatever.
Are there any Michigan fans here? Yeah. Any at all? There you go. We got some Michigan supporters here. So how did that make you feel with all the support that you received?
Oh, it brings out some good out of this horrible situation. You see the good in people. You realize, you hear so many bad stories.
Were you surprised?
You know what? I think I was surprised to the level that people have come forward. We expected our family and friends. We knew that they would be, and they have been. But strangers, people that don't know us, have gone out of their way to do things for Chad and our family.
And we hear so many stories like this. We have to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue my conversation with Tammy Karp. We'll be joined by childhood cancer specialist. Please stay with us.
Because a lot of adult cancers, there's some type of known risk factors,
right.
Lifestyles. Most children that I diagnose with cancer, they're otherwise healthy. They've done nothing obvious. They've been exposed to nothing obvious.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We've been talking with Tammy Karp, mother of Chad Karp, a little boy who was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was 3 years old. And now we're joined by Dr. Jeffrey Todd. He's Chief of Oncology at Children's Hospital of Michigan. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I would just, Tammy, I want to ask one question I didn't get to ask you before about your foundation. Tell me about how much time you spend on your foundation and what the mission of your foundation is.
When Chad was diagnosed, we decided that, my husband and I decided we couldn't just stand by and let this happen. DIPG has $0 found by the federal government.
Yeah.
So we decided to take this on, and we started the Chad Tough Foundation to support DIPG research. And
Chad Tough, you said, right?
Chad Tough. That's sort of the name everybody's given him.
Kid.
He is, and we're working hard to make a difference. And 4% of the national cancer budget is given to pediatrics, and that's just not right. Our kids are worth more than that.
Absolutely.
And DIPG gets none of that money. So all the money that's been raised for DIPG is raised by families like ours, and we couldn't just walk away from that. So
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Dr. Todd, what is DIPG? People are probably by asking, what are they talking about?
It's a brain tumor, comprises about 10% of all pediatric brain tumors, and it's in the what's called the brainstem, which is the main part of your brain that controls body functions.
Yeah.
One of the key aspects of treating brain tumors is surgery. Unfortunately, because it's in the brainstem, you can't surgically remove it, and that is the real challenge. Other things that we use to treat brain tumors, radiation and chemotherapy, can be beneficial at points in time. Quite often, people don't even biopsy this tumor because of where it's located. So we haven't had as much information to know how we can design the best treatments. But nowadays, there's some clinical trials where neurosurgeons are doing small biopsies to diagnose the IPG so we can better genetically analyze these tumors, and then hopefully we can find really good chemotherapy drugs to target this.
Yeah, and so what are the risk factors not only for DIPG but childhood cancers? People are saying, how do kids get these cancers?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because a lot of adult cancers, there's some type of known risk factors,
right.
Lifestyles. Most children that I diagnose with cancer, they're otherwise healthy. They've done nothing obvious. They've been exposed to nothing obvious. Probably only a small percentage where there's an actual risk factor. Some genetic syndromes like Down syndrome, those children have a higher risk of developing leukemia, so that's well known. There are some rare cancers where it definitely runs in the family. A tumor called retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the eye, that can definitely run in families where a parent can pass on the gene to their child, and they can then develop retinoblastoma. So in those cases, you might be looking early on, or even screen people before they're symptomatic for cancer. But the majority of children just happens out of nowhere, sort of under the radar.
And you've had quite an interesting life, haven't you? You've actually been a patient with childhood cancer yourself. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed beginning of 10th grade. So I've been a cancer survivor for over 30 years.
What did you have?
I had what's known as Hodgkin's disease. And so it was treated with surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. So I got the whole
deal.
The whole gamut. But definitely what I experienced in being able to being treated successfully, that obviously pushed me to go into medicine and use my personal experience to help other people.
And did it help you be more empathetic? And all of us try to be, but can you feel it for the kids, unlike others, as much?
Definitely, no, especially with being poked multiple times for blood draws, and also what the parents experienced. Thinking about how my parents handled when they were first told that I had cancer, and then sort of knowing that when I have to tell that to other families, to sort of realize and know that this is obviously one of the most challenging days of their lives that they're ever going to hear that.
Toughest days of our lives. Now I heard we have an audience. Somebody in the audience has a question for you.
Is there a greater risk for children who use their cell phones frequently to develop a brain cancer later on in life?
That's an interesting question. There was a study that came out about at least associated risk. Tell us about that, Doc.
That is a really good question, and it's somewhat controversial because there have been some studies that seem to suggest there might be a higher risk of developing brain tumors. And then there's been other studies that suggest that there isn't a higher risk. So definitely it's not clear cut yet, but we definitely need more research or more money raised to sort of study that further. But it does definitely highlight that we should look at things that people may be exposed to in the environment that can contribute to cancer.
And I'll tell you about cell phones. I just think kids need to stop using their phones as much as they do, not just for cancer risk, but just in general health. I mean, you're not moving, they're not exercising. The recent study that came out was associated. What that means is that there are associations that if you use your cell phones for 20 minutes a day for several years, that the risk of brain cancer can be increased several fold. And Doc is right. It doesn't mean that it's everybody agrees on it or it's a cause and effect. So it means that it's association. But my thing is, listen, tell your kids to get a hobby instead of the darn phone. They're looking at, Facebook, Instagram, and all day long and watching their phones at night. So besides just the cancer risk, it's not good for you. Let me ask you this about Tammy's son's diagnosis and prognosis. They said they gave him a 1 year or 12-month survival rate, and he's doing well. I mean, tell me, is that something that you find surprising? Maybe a little insight into that.
Well, I mean, I'm encouraged that he's doing well and that he's now on experimental treatment. So I think that that's really important and highlights sort of seeking out whatever treatments out there, and also the role of research to find new treatments.
Yeah, because as you pointed out, 4% of all the budget is for funding is to childhood cancer. I think because I'll be honest with you, this is the truth. Childhood cancer treatments don't make money for drug drug companies, they don't do it. So if it doesn't make money, people don't really care about it, which is the tragedy. Even though there are kids, people don't seem to care. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Coming up next, the story of another family's struggle with childhood cancer. Please stay with us.
My son was the most amazing kid ever. He was loving, kind, compassionate, gentle. He was, I miss his hugs. He had the best hugs in the whole entire world.
Oh. Welcome back. You're watching Ask Dr. Nandi. Childhood cancers make up less than 1% of all cancers diagnosed each year, yet it's perhaps one of the most devastating diagnoses a parent can receive. Although advances in medical treatment have extended the survival rate, cancer is second only to accidents as a leading cause of death for children. My next guest lost her 10-year-old son to brain cancer after a 5-year fight against the disease. Please welcome Kim Karp. How are you?
Good, nice to meet you.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I know it's not easy. Tell us about your son. Yes.
My son was the most amazing kid ever. He was loving, kind, compassionate, gentle. He was, I miss his hugs. He had the best hugs in the whole entire world.
Oh.
He just, when he walked into a room, he lit it up. He was happy. He was just a wonderful, wonderful blessing, and I was so lucky to be his mom.
Sorry. So what happened? What happened with your son?
My son, for about a 3-week time period, he was fine. Everything was great, and then he started to fall off of his bike and be a little bit wobbly. I noticed he would tilt his head to the right or left, excuse me, and he would just he was walking pretty good, but he would walk into walls, and so I took him to the doctor, and they told me it was an ear infection.
Was it the ear infection that made him do that?
That's what they told me, and they gave me a prescription, and for a couple days he was doing good, and then he started throwing up, and we went back to the doctor and went to actually the emergency room, and then they told me it was a viral infection. In about 2 weeks it would run its course. That's why he was throwing up. And so I went and I switched doctors. I went to a new doctor, and I went in and I said, something's not right with him, something's wrong. And she said, she did all the neurological exams, and she said, everything looks okay, we're going to give it a little bit. And she watched him walk, and he walked a little bit wobbly, but nothing she thought to be concerned about. So I called her a day before our week was up, and he was screaming, and I said, we have to do something. So
Screaming, why?
He was just in so much pain. He had sensitivity to light. He was throwing up. It was just, and I thought it was a viral infection. What am I supposed to do? I was listening to the doctor, so I took him in, and he had a CAT scan. And I remember the phone call. She called me and she said, are you home alone? And I said, my best friend just pulled into her mom's driveway. And she says, can you please come up to here? And I said, sure. So I went up, and I knew it wasn't good. The morning before, I had walked over to my neighbors and asked them for Benadryl for the CAT scan to calm his nerves. And my neighbor, he said to me, I hope it's not what we went through. And at that moment, it clicked with me that it was probably a brain tumor, because they had a daughter who passed away from brain cancer.
Brain tumor as well.
So we went, she told us, okay, this is what's going to happen. And she goes, go home, pack a bag. You're not coming home for a while. And I had my kids. I was a single mom. I had 2 kids, and I called my girlfriend and I said, will you please get my kids? And she, my neighbors, everybody took everything and just handled it for me. And we went to the hospital. He had a scan. The next morning he was in surgery for about 10 to 12 hours, and he had a tumor the size of a golf ball removed off of his brainstem.
What a great picture out there. What a cutie. The time between when they told you the first time that it was a ear infection to the CAT scan, how much time went by between that time?
It was a 2.5 to 3 week time span that I just was trying to find, and I trusted what they said, and I don't blame them. Brain tumors are so uncommon, and I mean, they're common, but I don't blame anybody for that.
But here's what I'm trying to say. I think that if you have a gut feeling, and she did, you keep pursuing it, and that's, for anything that you have, you try to get a second opinion. It's really important, because the longer you wait, for any disease, including having a tumor, guess what? You may lose your window to treat. And so what happened? What kind of treatment besides the surgery did Ryan have?
Over the course of the 5 years that Ryan fought, he had 7 tumor resections. His tumors would come back in 3 different places. He would come back in the brainstem, in his internal auditory canal, and he had a couple that came back in the top of his head. I can't remember exactly the area that it was, but sure. He had 7 tumor resections. He had 2 rounds of 5 days a week for 6 weeks radiation treatments.
How did he handle all this?
You would never know that he had cancer. When you looked at him, the only time you ever knew he had cancer is when he was on the chemo and he lost all of his hair. He never was sick. He was happy, go lucky. He lived. That's what he wanted to do, was just to live. And he's a kid. He didn't know that he was sick or what the difference was. He just trusted me that I was doing what I needed to do to get him where he needed to be in life.
And I know you're sharing this with us for a reason. What message would you like to give parents out there or others who are suffering the same way you had suffered?
I wanted to share our story and to just bring awareness to childhood cancer and to brain cancer specifically, because there's such a lack of funding. And it's a lonely experience. And I have been so fortunate enough to be blessed with finding support groups online, on Facebook, and meeting people all over the world.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very courageous. Of course. And I want you to really listen to what you're saying. Talk to your congressman. That's the only way it's going to happen. Talk to Congress, talk to your legislators and say, you know what? We need to help kids like Ryan, because even though he lost his fight, let's help other kids. So we'll take a break. When we come back, I'll talk with Kim about her mission to help other families also with cancer. Please stay with us.
Those families that are going through the process, when they find out that there's nothing left that they can do for their child, I typically reach out to those people, or they come to me. I feel like I have my partner in heaven. He hooks me up with these families that I can just work with.
Welcome back. I'm here with Kim Karp, who lost her 10-year-old son to cancer. And Dr. Jeffrey Todd is back with us. He's Chief of Oncology at Children's Hospital of Michigan. And Kim, we were talking about, why you were doing this and how you wanted to raise awareness. And what's your mission, that you embarked upon to help other families as well?
Well, it's a couple different things. I am doing a lot of fundraising for research. I am doing an ultimate hike. For the last 4 years, I've hiked 30 miles every year in October to raise money for childhood cancer research. I have, because of everything that we went through, I've always wanted to pay it forward to others. And so those families that are going through the process, when they find out that there's nothing left that they can do for their child, I typically reach out to those people, or they come to me. I feel like I have my partner in heaven. He hooks me up with these families that I can just work with, and I share my story and my experience, and just check in with them to see how they're doing, and offer and tell them about our story, about how we donated his tumor to research. And if they're interested, I've gone so far as to work with their medical professionals that they've worked with to help coordinate their donation for research, just like was done for me.
It's interesting. You talked about donation. A lot of these folks are having children that die, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a huge part of it. And you felt like you were alone during many times, and you're trying to have them not feel alone like you do.
Right.
Like you did, rather.
Yes, like I did. I just want to be there as a support, because it's so lonely when you're losing your child.
And you're an amazing person. I'll tell you, most people in the audience here is listening to this, and people watching at home, most people don't do this. They are not as selfless as you are. They stay in, like I talked about, I think before, is that one of two things happen when you have a problem like this, is that you can just go into your shell and say, this is terrible, and do nothing about it and just stay in your sorrow. But what you did was you would take this and actually make it better for others. In fact, Kim actually donated her son's tumor to science. Tell us about that.
Well, I want to first say that it's not for everybody to donate, and it's not something that's easy to talk about, but we ask people to donate their organs when they are in car accidents and stuff like that. So I wanted to give to research so that we could find a cure for this, so that no other family has to go through what we've gone through. And unfortunately, families have gone through what we've gone through, but because of his donation, when he passed away, they were able to take 32 million live cancer cells and send it off to Stanford University through the Collaborative Ependymoma Research Network. And they have found some interesting things. They were kind enough to send me a letter in October of 2012 to let me know what some of the research and findings that they had found with his
And I want to read a
donation.
letter. I want to read a letter, at least a part of it from MD Anderson when this actually went to. It says that your donation of Ryan's tumor appeared to have high levels of a certain gene. This was extremely helpful to us as it provided validation of our findings and will help guide future studies. I mean, what you did was so heroic, and I'll tell you, you're a true health hero. Big applause for her, please. Big applause. Dr. Todd, advice for families who are going through what Kim had to go through. What would you give them? What kind of advice?
Well, obviously, you want the support from your family members, friends, clergy, and obviously at our hospitals, we have a lot of support also. Not only the doctors, the nurses, but we also have social workers who just deal with children with cancer, child life specialists that help the children deal with prolonged hospitalizations and how to deal with the stress and the unpleasant pokes and things like that. So I think we have a whole big team of people who are geared to try to support the child in the family, and obviously reach out to people in the community as well. And I'm really amazed at how other families help each other, as you had mentioned within the clinic. People who have come from completely different backgrounds, how they bond, they sit in the waiting rooms together, they're in the inpatient floors together, and they just come together and they really provide support for each other.
There's nothing like having your child be ill that brings out this protective feeling, and all you can do is you feel so helpless and you want to help, and that feeling is shared by other parents. And I'm sure because you've been ill in your life. And when I was ill as a child, I remember my dad, he stopped everything to help me, and that's something I can never forget. It's something that what happens when you have children that are sick, especially with a diagnosis like this. Mm-hmm. Now, she told us what happens. What is the grieving process like for people who have this terrible tragedy? You have many patients that have to go through this. What is it like, and how can we help other families that are going through it?
I mean, it's really hard to sort of say how people will handle it. I actually find it very reassuring if I maintain contact with my patient's family. That sort of, it's going to be a while until they sort of feel comfortable that they would want to return back to the hospital. But I've had families after the grieving time come back to the hospital, and I feel that it helps me heal from this whole process, because obviously whenever I lose a patient, it's devastating to me, obviously to the families, but I mean, to me, it's a personal loss as well. So if the families decide to maintain contact and come back, I really find comfort from that as well, along with all of my colleagues at the hospital.
We actually have a question in the audience. So do we have a question? Yes, ma'am.
How important is funding for childhood cancer research?
I'll ask him this question. How important is it? And you pointed out some statistics. How important is it for you, to get this increased?
It's so important, because it's just our kids are not given the proper chance at life as everybody else is, and it's just so critical to donate your funds to good, solid charities, and find a good charity and look at the portion of what they do for administrative work compared to what they do and how they donate for research. It's really key to find a really super awesome charity to go to.
And I'll point out one thing, the truth of the matter is that childhood cancers don't make a lot of money for drug companies, so they don't fund it. You've got to understand this is really an important thing. Your kids are dying, and the drug companies will not do anything. This is capitalism, so it's up to us to advocate for these kids and really, really ask our government to step up and do the right thing. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll show you the unique way one organization raises money for childhood cancer research. Please stay with us.
They call us the crazy head shaving people. because we're crazy enough to think that this head shaving thing can find cures for childhood cancers.
Welcome back. You're watching Ask Dr. Nandi. The St. Baldrick's Foundation is one of the largest organizations in the world that funds research to find cures for childhood cancers. The group raises money and awareness by holding head shaving events in communities across the country. Thousands of volunteers and donors take part every year. Over the past decade, guess what? St. Baldrick's has raised over $176 million for cancer research in 26 countries. That's amazing. Joining me now is 16-year-old Pietro Pellerito, a brain cancer survivor and a 2011 St. Baldrick's ambassador. Also here is one of Foundation's volunteer event organizers, Michael Fiskus. Please welcome them for us. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Michael, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Boy, $176 million, huh?
It's an incredible amount of money that's been driven just by volunteers willing to kind of do something bold.
It's unbelievable. And Pietro, you were diagnosed. How old were you when you were diagnosed with brain cancer?
I was 11 years old when I was diagnosed with brain cancer.
And how old are you now?
I am 16 years old
16
today.
years old now. So tell me how you and your parents knew that there was something really wrong.
Well, it all started a little bit before I was diagnosed with cancer, when I started to get frequent headaches and I started to lose my appetite. The headaches got worse and worse to the point where it would start waking me up when I went to sleep. And one night when I went to bed, it woke me up and it was so much pain that I went to my parents and I knew something was wrong, and I asked them to check up on something and see if they knew what could be done to help it, because they're doctors. So my mom took me.
Oh, your parents are doctors?
Yes.
Okay.
So my mom took me to her office to get an MRI, and that day they discovered that I had cancer.
Well, and so how long had you had headaches before they did that, you said?
They were pretty frequent. I would get about 2 or 3 a day.
Wow. And where were they? Show me what part of the head was hurting.
It occurs in the front part of the head.
And what happened? How were you treated, and how did you manage the treatment?
I was treated. First, I had a brain surgery. It lasted about 12 hours, and then after that was the radiation treatment, where for about 6 weeks, about 5 times days a week, I would go and get radiation to my spine and to my head when laying down. Then after that came the chemotherapy, where for about 16 months I got chemotherapy.
16 months?
Yes, 16 months, and it was about 3-4 times a month that I had to do it, and that's the process that I went through.
Wow, and you're doing fine today, huh?
Yes, I am.
Well, that's awesome news, right? Went through all this. So, Mike St. Baldrick, why do you do it? Why do you spend so much time and energy? And I know you're passionate about it. Tell me why.
Well, I think when people discover the lack of funding for child-specific cancer, they usually feel compelled to do something. The number that we talk about, less than 4%, to me was just unbelievable. And the St. Baldrick's Foundation has become, outside of the federal government, the largest source of funding for child-specific cancer research.
And you've got a button that says every 3 minutes. Tell me about that.
So every 3 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer around the world. You've talked about some of the numbers already, and 1 in 5 of those kids won't survive. So our focus is not only to raise funds, but awareness of the current state of things.
Yeah, here's the thing, and this is the sad part about it, is that adults, probably, maybe 55 to 60% of them will survive. So because of that, there's more money for adult cancers, plus there's, the numbers are increased. 1 out of 5 children who are not surviving, a child who has their entire life ahead of them. So you have let's say a 10-year-old who passed away from cancer, has an entire lifetime that you could really save and enrich. So the reason why we're doing this show, the only reason is that so people who either have lost a loved one, know somebody who's lost a loved one, or just looks at this and says, this is not right, do something about it. go to your local legislator. It's the only way it's going to happen, is that go to your local legislators, and of course, help organizations like St. Baldrick's. But I want to thank you both to come for coming to us and letting us know what's going on and the courage that you have in fighting it and becoming an ambassador. And Mike, we know Mike from another life, and he is tireless in his efforts, and I thank you for doing what you're doing. We'll take a break. When we come back next, we'll meet Pietro's parents, and someone will brave the shave right here in our studio. Please stay with us.
My phone rang. I walked out of the room while the MRI was going on. When I walked back in, I looked at my wife's face, and it changed our life forever.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. Now, Pietro Pellerito's parents, Miriam and Benedetto, have joined us, and they want to tell us a little bit about his story. One thing is that we were talking before, is that you had a math competition, and it was pretty close to your diagnosis or after your diagnosis, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that math competition.
Yes, so I've been preparing for a math competition at my school for a very long time before I was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was diagnosed with cancer and the doctor told me that I had a brain tumor, the first thing that he told me once I needed surgery was, could you postpone it to Friday, which was the date of the math competition. He said he couldn't, but he made a deal with me that if I could be walking before the competition started, that he'd let me out of the hospital and return home, and then I'd go to the competition the next day. So my 12-hour brain surgery, I underwent it, and about 3 days later, I told my parents that I want to get up and walk. And I did all those exercises, and I was able to go home the next day, and I went to the math competition, and I got first place.
Oh. Most kids find unbelievable excuses not to go have a math test, right? Here's a young man who will do anything to go to a math competition because he loves math. That's awesome. We were talking also before that this changed your lives tremendously. Tell us about that. How did it? What did it do to your lives?
Well, I mean, at first we didn't think there was anything wrong, but my wife and mother intuition thought otherwise. So when he came to our room, Larry, last time with the headache, we decided to take him to her office to get an MRI. And just as it would be, I had the day off, so I figured, I'll go with him, and then after he's done with the MRI, I'll take him back to class. Well, we never made it home because at that time, my phone rang. I walked out of the room while the MRI was going on. When I walked back in, I looked at my wife's face, and it changed our life forever.
Yeah, and I think that he's lucky to have two parents that are in the medical profession, because you guys did a lot. And you're an ambassador for St. Baldrick's, so I want to have some exciting news for you. We're going to show what St. Baldrick's does right here. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So we're going to have somebody shave their head right here. You guys ready? Yeah. All right. So Tiffany, right? Yes. And Ken is our volunteer. Thank you, sir. And we'll watch as Tiffany takes care of business here, and Ken's allows us to shave for a great cause. And Mike, maybe talk to us about how many folks do this and what the meaning of it is, and the sacrifice that people make.
Well, when people decide that they want to step up and do something, there's really not anything easier than giving up your hair. Right. So these folks will shave their head in solidarity with kids who lose their hair during cancer treatment, and we're raising funds and awareness at the same time. Yeah,
and I think that it's so symbolic. It was even talking to Pietro's parents, and Benedetto said, that's how they got involved, because you feel bad and you feel empathetic for your child, and what can you do for them? And one of the things is at least do this small token and effort. And I'll tell you, and I've been at these events. It's amazing how many people actually volunteer. The last one we had was just several months ago. And tell us about that event.
So the event that we host in the Village of Romeo has grown to be one of the largest in the world. This year we're the 5th largest. We had over 500 shavees, and we raised $343,000 in March of this year.
And next year, what's your goal?
Next year, we're hoping to push it over 400,000. We're actually going to be taking over the whole village and shutting down Main Street.
Taking over the whole town, and so, and you can see how long it takes It doesn't take very much time at all, but I'd love for you guys to involve. What's the website that they can go to if they get more information and to get more involved?
So stbaldrick's.org is the website you want to go to. There's events hosted around the world. If anyone's interested in shaving or volunteering their time in coordinating events, they go to stbaldrick's.org to get started.
And so much of the funding goes towards childhood cancer. Pietro, when you see this, and you can see it from there, tell me what that makes you feel like, because you've gone through, you know, a lot of suffering from cancer. When you see somebody doing this and volunteering, how does it make you feel?
Well, it just makes me feel like there are people who understand what I'm going through and are willing and able to help and do anything to make what I went through something that no kid has to go through ever again.
And you know what it makes me feel like is that there are guys just like Ken everywhere that really care about you and all the kids that are suffering. Because here's the deal, you know what? Like we talked about, 4% of all the funding is going towards childhood cancer. We need to get that number up. And people are saying, you know, instead of saying, you know what, it's somebody else that should do it, the government or somebody else, we're going to take, like Mike is saying, we're going to take things in our own hands. And guess what? We're going to try to raise the money so that, you know, we don't have kids like we talked about today that have actually passed away from this. So I really applaud your efforts, Mike.
Thank you.
And Pietro, Benedetto, Miriam, thanks for coming on. And Tiffany and Ken, thank you for showing how easy it is. How long did that take? Less than 2 minutes. But you know what? The millions that are raised could really save many children. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. We have to take a break. When we come back, we'll have Partha's prescriptions. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. Today we've talked about a difficult health issue, childhood cancer. Here's what we can take away from today's Partha's prescriptions. Childhood cancer rates have been rising slightly over the past few decades. About 1 in 285 children will be diagnosed with cancer before age 20. The causes and survival rates for childhood cancer are different from adult types. Childhood cancers are often the result of DNA changes in cells very early in life, while adult cancers are usually linked to lifestyle or environmental risk factors. And childhood cancers tend to respond better to treatments like chemotherapy. Now, research is key in curing childhood cancers. Many experts believe that research on childhood brain cancer may offer clues to curing other forms of cancer in both adults and children. However, only 4% of federal funding for cancer research goes towards childhood cancers. That's why fundraising by organizations such as St. Baldrick's is so very important. Visit stbaldricks.org for more information. And finally, we all should remember that our children's health is extremely precious. Hug your child today. To stay informed about today's topic and learn more about healthy living, please visit Ask Dr. Nandi. Also, we'd love to hear from you. Join our discussions on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And lastly, there's a beautiful word in the Hindi language that literally means the light in me honors the light in you, and that word is namaste. So namaste to each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. See you next time.